All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 17th live stream. And for this week, we have a special treat. We have a guest that I had mentioned from our last stream. And in addition, so far, we have our regular folks, Blarg, Neo, and Stevo. Hello, everyone. Hello, Rex. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
G'day
And
all.
I'll have to admit that I
Hello.
was, as usual, just not very well organized. It's just been really busy at work and just with the house and stuff. Although not quite like, busy, but still been busy. So haven't had a chance to prepare for any of this. So thank you, Rex, for being able to be available because otherwise we would just be kind of shooting the breeze like we did last week. But before we get started, let's start off with a little bit of introductions and we'll just go through ourselves and then you can introduce yourself and you can talk about and since this is sort of a stream where we kind of talk about religion and philosophy and all that, you can kind of give us that background. But I'll just kick it off here. So you can just call me QC. And yeah, I started this channel really to address a lot of the fallacious arguments that theists, specifically Christians, were putting up on a YouTube channel called The Atheist Experience. And I have been spending a lot of time on The Atheist Experience YouTube comments. And now I'm switched mostly over to in Twitter and just going back and forth there. But for the most part, I try to have this channel as a platform for people to have a civil discussion about things. So I try to bring people who are capable of having that civil discussion. It's sometimes hard to find people who are willing to you know, have an actual conversation beyond, hiding behind their keyboard. And also because, to be fair, I do get a little bit spicy, if you want to call it, in the YouTube comments as well as on Twitter. So I can definitely see that people who are not quite confident in themselves might be too scared to come on. So I understand that part. But yeah, for the most part, this stream is here, or this platform is here for us to have a civil conversation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Blarg, who you had, we spoke a little bit briefly before we got on. Blarg, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, g'day all. G'day Rex. As you noted in the as I noted in the little preamble, you're talking to an Australian from Queensland, and had noted that it was an absolutely gorgeous day here today. Got up to got down to about 288 Kelvin last night, and it'll get up to a lovely 300-ish today. So lovely.
300
So, for those
degrees? That seems
Hey?
pretty hot. 300
No,
degrees, you said?
yeah, in Kelvin. Australia's moving to Kelvin.
Yeah,
Yes.
Oh, really?
Excellent.
We're
No, it's not. I just made that up. That's completely insane.
yeah. Kelvin is another completely different measurement. It's definitely not what my American brain is. That's what I'll say.
No, it was about 15 in overnight and 25, somewhere between 25 and 27 during the day. It's lovely. So yes, for
The
those.
problem is Aussies would do that.
Sorry.
Well, 300
You
Kelvin is
Aussies
fine.
would switch to Kelvin, yes.
That would be a funny proposition to make in Parliament. I'd love to see people's hair catch on fire if someone made that suggestion. You imagine that in America? Oh.
Nobody would understand whatsoever.
I think if you ever came to Texas, you would it would definitely blow 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 300 Kelvin out of the water.
And I live in Louisiana, so it's a different story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, usually we got more like Texas temperatures here, where I am. I'm closer to the equator than Texas, so
That makes
yeah.
sense. Okay.
yeah.
It's just
So the northern part of Queensland. So yeah, but anyway, I think.
Well,
Oh,
a little bit about your background then.
yeah, I'm got degrees in engineering and electrical engineering and applied physics. So that's my background. I worked for years as an electrical engineer, not as a physicist. But yeah, that's my main background. And yeah, basically never managed to find any possibility of believing in the stories about a god. So it always seemed weird and strange to me. Even when I went to a Catholic school, still didn't manage to do that. They were really good about me giving them a hard time during religion class, though. So that was nice of them. So that's me.
that's excellent. What an excellent start. Shall I go now,
All right.
or
No, Neil, if you want to go, or
Yeah.
actually, Steve-O, why don't?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Neil.
Neil first, yeah.
So
And
I'm
you do have to say something about Eurovision.
Yes, we had Eurovision tonight, so I have been on the rum and ginger. So apologies if I sound a bit too rough, shall we say?
Yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah, it's good. I'm the resident theist, a pantheist by, well, I was about to say by trade, but that's complete bollocks. Pantheist by belief, and trained in chemistry, sort of got a degree and stuff. So biochem, chem, and biology, I know a fair bit about. Not as much a genius as bloggers, but I try and do my best.
Oh, just for those who are unaware, Australia is part of Europe, but unfortunately, our Eurovision competitor got knocked out in the semis. So
Yes.
our
So
milkshake
did
man.
Ireland as well. I should point out, Ireland failed the semis, but Australia has been weirdly part of it for a good few years.
It's like
Right.
6 or
And
7
did
years or something.
miles better than the UK has ever done. I should point out.
Yeah, we've had some pretty good ones actually. Gone pretty close.
If you were to be part of any continent, shouldn't you be part of Asia since you're so close to like Japan
It
and
does
Korea?
seem weird, yeah.
I think for
Eurovision,
Eurovision, it counts. It counts.
it's
Eurovision
not
counts.
Europe. I should point out, Eurovision is not for Europe. It's for the European Broadcasting Group,
EBU, I believe.
which can include anyone who pays to be in it. So Kazakhstan has been a member, and Australia has basically paid up, and so they've been involved. Mostly through an accident because someone got confused with Austria. But yeah, so anyone who pays to be a member of Eurovision can be in Eurovision.
I think Craig Kelly is hoping that I can help you out a little bit too, Neil, by mentioning some problem that I won't get into just yet.
Not tonight.
I've got
I
glass
was
on
just gonna
standby.
say, I do want to say that it shouldn't be just Blarg mentioning the trolley problem. It should, especially, it should include our guests as well as the rest of the
Doesn't
panel.
really matter. No, I don't need to go through that again.
Yeah, the trolley problem. I should say the most notorious example in modern ethics, because whenever anyone brings up ethical questions or conundrums, it's always the trolley problem. Online discourse, especially.
Yeah, we had a particularly fun one Was it 2 weeks ago?
2 3 weeks
Where
ago.
yeah, it was just it just kept coming up. Mostly my fault.
I
And
still blame you for everything, Blarg.
and then someone, what was it? UQC suggested that every time I mention trolley problem, someone should take a drink. So
I was just
we'll
mentioning that you essentially created a new drinking game. Where
Yeah.
I think QC would pass away.
Yeah,
I
well,
would.
Stevo was forced to save all his up to the end of the stream and then chug it down.
And I did it live for everybody to see. So there you go.
I promise I'll behave.
You better.
All right, so so Neo, sorry we interrupted you, but please go on with your introductions.
Oh, where did I get up to?
We forgot.
Well, I did interrupt you on. Well, we did talk a little about Eurovision, and then you mentioned you are a theist.
So pantheist, which is slightly different from how most people think of pantheism, because the background of pantheism is just that you just think that any possible gods come from the universe. So the universe is always first, and then the gods come afterwards. And the biggest any god could be would be to be the universe. So while most people think that pantheism is thinking the universe is a god, that's not quite true, but it is the popular version of it. If that makes sense.
It does. If I can interject, pantheist, that is the stereotype of pantheism, and obviously pantheism is not a single essence or one thing. There are many variations, and pick and choose, right?
Yeah.
All right, Steve Oden.
All right, I'll keep it brief. I am the Louisiana born country boy, court jester group member of the group, atheist, pretty much most of my life. I went to college for sociology, so I have a background in social issues and all that, but I never did finish college. Came close, but my dad social stopped me from finishing. And compared to the rest of these guys, I'm a neophyte in everything, but I try my best. And that's pretty much it. I'm not going to go into too much more detail.
Respectable.
And and Rex, before you start, let me just have this ready here. So as I had mentioned, I had run across Rex through Twitter, and Rex, I think you consider yourself sort of a philosopher, and when I went to your link tree or the list of links that you had, it looks like you are also an author, so you are published, and you also have oh shoot, I was just here. I was also on your went to your Substack. Let me just bring that up. Okay. So you also have a Substack where you have some articles published. I have to admit I haven't had a chance to go through them all. I did find the articles that at least the titles or the subjects when I skimmed through it was very interesting. Specifically the one that you had on Nietzsche, and of course the one you have on Kant as well. So you definitely looked very interesting to have on. So I'll now turn it over to you, and you can tell us more about yourself. If there's anything you want me to kind of pull up, just let me know. But go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you for for letting me come on. So I have a background. I have an academic background in mostly business, but I did partake in the humanities. I did dip into the humanities, and although my degrees are in mathematics and economics, business related, I should say thoroughly. That is also when I really began to study on my own and read the classics, read as much as the classics as I possibly could. And I kept going, and I dipped into sociology, psychology, and I'd like to think I've touched on a lot of major bases, discounting, let's say, part of the, I should say, popular physics. I I will say that is where my knowledge really ends on there because I'm not a physics guy. I am thoroughly in the humane arts, and when I started my platform, I kind of I was led I was led to like create a platform that more so focused on philosophical fragments and just thinking because really you ask a philosopher what their notion of philosophy is and you'll get 100 different answers, right? So I want one that's focused more on thinking and more on like the event of thinking and the self. It's not a terribly academic way of thinking of it because academics are usually caught up in a lot of, let's say, just jargon. Let's just say jargon and merit that only goes as far as a degree. When in reality, having a degree and such does not mean that you actually know what you're talking about. And I know you've had at least your fair share of run ins with people with like academic degrees, and well, you've heard their theistic arguments. So yeah, that's a little about me. I do consider myself a philosopher. I studied mainly 20th century philosophy. I've looked into existentialism and post-structuralism, structuralism, so a lot of French and a lot of the Germans in there. I've of course touched Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, the so-called forerunners of existentialism, but that is also debatable since they likely would have never considered themselves part of that movement if they were in the correct historical time. Yeah, I have a predecessor too. Noted German American philosopher by the name of Walter Kaufmann. Inspired me. He wrote a critique of religion and philosophy. I'm not sure if you've heard of that or talk about it. It's not too well known in besides academic circles, but it is an excellent, probably the most devastating critique I've ever read personally on organized religion. And I think the only ones he doesn't attack are Hinduism because that is far too large and expansive, and Islam. But yes, I consider myself coming directly from that tradition, and I have read around. I guess that about sums up who I am and at least what I do and what I will continue to do, I should say.
Okay. By the way, my exposure to Walter Kaufman has been kind of on his translations of Nietzsche. I think I've seen his translations of
Yeah,
and some of his essays on that, but yeah, I wasn't familiar of his kind of critiques. Although I did want to mention that at least based on your bio, it looked like you graduated from um, a Christian college, right?
yeah, that is true. I did. I went to the University of Mary Hardin Baylor, the sister school to Baylor, and I gotta say there were a few experiences there, and that really drove home me going in the opposite direction. Although, to be quite frank, I think even though I was raised a Catholic personally in my household, everyone in my family kind of grew out of it. Everyone kind of just went their own separate ways, and we're like, okay, well, let's actually look at this from another angle, and that's kind of what happened. Despite me going to a Christian university, I just decided to follow up on my own thing, and yeah, here I am now. anti, Possibly anti-Christian, you can call me.
So you
so
made the
you
mistake of learning to think for yourself. Is that it?
Oh, could you say that? Your mic was cutting out a little bit.
So sorry, you made the mistake of learning to think for yourself.
That is definitely one of the great mistakes I've made. Yes, like once you begin thinking for yourself, and I would say looking at multiple sources and reading many different books, that is when you can finally formulate your own kind of worldview without, I should say, referring to like a singular doctrine or a singular idea and then basing everything off that. So,
How
yeah.
how dare you? Sweet. We don't tolerate that sort of behaviour around here.
Heathen.
Oh,
The horror. Sorry, go on.
I've just about finished. Do you have any more questions? I'll be glad to answer to the best of my ability.
Actually,
right off the
before
top of
you
my head.
go, I know that Craig Kelly was asking about the last week's video being pulled, and I hadn't been looking or I hadn't been paying attention, but it did get copyright stricken because I had shown some clips from what's his name, the
Oh,
late
Oliver.
John Oliver.
last week.
John
Yeah,
Oliver.
last week with
Yes.
John Oliver.
That bullshit.
oh, that's why I couldn't. Yeah, respond.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do an appeal that it was for fair use. So hopefully we'll see what happens because we were definitely having a lot of fun last week.
That is a shame it got pulled.
For those who also hadn't been following, I did try and get our old friend Florida Gump to join us today. They've been hammering. I know Neil has been at him as well. But
Oh yeah,
so have I.
Been trying.
I even gave him the option of having the debate. He gets to choose the topic and tells me after he starts. And look at that. There's no sign of him. How amazing.
Well, I think a lot of people really do fold once you invite them out and try to actually have a discussion with them. In my personal experience, I've seen that too.
He was actually the very first person to join us on the stream, and
Wow.
he's been running ever since. So hence Florida Gump. He just keeps running.
That's clever.
He keeps calling us cowards for not phoning him for a private debate, and you go, "There's no such thing as a private debate. That's just him going to proselytize and then declare that he won." And so, yeah, debates are in public, buddy.
He made the mistake of joining the first
issue
time.
was that he was very polite when he was here, and yet he didn't really say anything. And then
Right up
he
until near
lied
the end.
and was massively dishonest in the comment section afterwards, to the point that basically people like going, did you actually watch the video that you were in? Can you actually list? And so yeah, he had to lie, and that's why he doesn't ever want to be in any debate ever again, because he can't be honest about what he said and what has been said to him.
Just a question from Craig Kelly. How much do you think Hitler was influenced by Nietzsche?
Ooh, that's a steaming question right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
What
Go
I'll-
right for the
what
home
I'll
run
say-
shot.
Well, what I'll say is I do take Walter Kaufman's view, and as you know, after Nietzsche did have a breakdown, and it was in those last few years of life that he stopped writing, he stopped doing public philosophy. He was basically confined to a chair, and so his sister is the one who took his writings and edited them, and she was already a proto-Nazi, and her husband, I believe, was also a proto-Nazi. And so what they did is Nietzsche's fame was it was already there by the time they took it. By the time they started editing his works, I mean. So what they did is they used the fame. His sister edited the works, they made the Ubermensch kind of Aryan Superman, and the rest is there. I have no doubt in my mind that Hitler himself was said to have had some Nietzsche aphorisms memorized, but let's be real. They were reading the tampered versions of Nietzsche. They were reading Nietzsche out of his context. They were reading the worst of Nietzsche. And I do think his teachings were twisted. So it depends on how you really want to approach this. I don't. They were influenced by the Nietzsche that came from his sister. So basically, a Nietzsche not from Nietzsche, a Nietzsche from an outside source, and that's already dubious. But as you know, Nietzsche also did say some interesting. He had some interesting comments on anti-Semitism too. He said he wanted to shoot them with a gun in one letter. So that is contrary to the popular stereotype that, oh look, here's the Nietzsche Hitler pipeline. So yeah, I it depends on how you want to look at it. I don't think he was influenced by Nietzsche per se. I think Hitler and the Nazis were influenced by people like Richard Wagner or people like Nietzsche's sister, which is unfortunate. Does that answer your
Well,
question?
I mean, and the thing I would also add to that is, uh, just because an idea can be twisted to justify someone's own personal views or their own personal worldviews, doesn't mean that the original thought, the original ideas are responsible for that. And you can look
Oh
at
yeah.
Marx. His ideas. I think they're brilliant. And his insights into capitalism is, I mean, it's astounding. But people have taken that and come up with most horrendous views and justifications of some really really horrible things. But I wouldn't, unlike a lot of people that you see on Twitter and where whatnot. I don't think you can say that's Marxism causing those things. It's horrible people finding ways to justify their own viewpoints, and this applies to Christianity as well. That it's not necessarily Christianity, and it's not necessarily Muslim or Islam that's resulted in those horrible things. Is people taking that and connecting it into atheism. It pretty much tells you that there is no God, right? There is no, uh, objective truth out there that says this is the way things are and this is the truth, and this is, and your ideas are correct if they conform to it. No, it's ideas that come from humans. It's not coming from a God. So I'll just say the idea of saying that Hitler being influenced by Nietzsche, yeah, technically it's true, but in kind of the most trivial way.
Yeah, if you
Can I
want to slice it. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm cutting someone off. Go on.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask if anyone is familiar with the YouTube channel Philosophy Tube.
Oh, I've never watched it, but I've heard bad things about it, if I'm being honest.
Because yeah, it would be interesting because the there was an episode talking about that Nietzsche Hitler thing. Yeah, she did that. So for those who are unaware, yeah, the host, the main person on it, is a trans woman.
Okay.
It's a very strange looking channel to watch, because the sort of dressed up in a really unusual sort of an outfit, usually, and speaks in a particular way. I don't have enough of a background in philosophy to know how well she's delivering the content or not, but it does sound, so what you were just talking about with Nietzsche and Hitler does track pretty well exactly with what that episode was talking about. So that's all I was going to add.
Yeah, it is a common myth that people do believe. Like the Nietzsche Hitler pipeline is like a solidified. Oh, Nietzsche wrote this. Obviously, he said this, and I think that is totally bogus. But at least if you can dispel those common myths, they'll do Nietzsche some good, because Nietzsche did care about his reputation. In Ecce Homo, he even says he before the book even really begins, he says in the preface that he is he and don't confuse him with anyone else. I think that's his cry for, look, I am here, I am, and I'm laying down what I believe. And obviously, anarchists take Nietzsche. I know of a few communists who take Nietzsche. I know I've actually seen, believe it or not, I've seen religious readings of Nietzsche too, like Christian religious readings, and it just goes to show you that anyone can take like any piece of philosophy, doctrine, or even loose set of beliefs, stitch them together into something and say, "Hey, look, this is what it means." Obviously, you're wrong if you think otherwise.
Yeah, so why, being that that's the way people behave, I wonder why there are 45,000 different denominations of Christianity.
Yeah, it is a very funny thing because, and you find a lot of those groups too. Honestly, uh, each one is their own, and they are right. The other guys must have some weird, twisted version of it. Not us though. We're okay. We
Yeah,
have it
they
right.
don't. A lot of, well, some of them also think they just don't understand it properly. You just go, they'll come around eventually, sort of thing. They're just doing it wrong. So, but yeah, others, you know, you would have been very familiar with the evangelicals. Basically, consider Catholics not to be Christians at all.
Oh yeah, it's been a whole mess since the Protestant Reformation, if you ask me. It's too many fractured viewings of doctrine, and at least to the church's credit, the Catholic Church's credit, they managed to hold a monopoly on it for the longest time, and that's just because they burned heretics and they destroyed books. You know, I got to give them credit; they held it for a very long time, and then after Luther, that's when it got out of control, and we get Catholicism, which is very, very
Well,
foreign to.
Well,
having mass in the vernacular really screwed the pooch. I think
uh,
that
yes.
don't let the masses understand what's being said.
Exactly.
As
Yeah,
soon as
You got to
everybody realised
tell
what
them
the
what to think.
Bible could
that's right.
say, they suddenly realised, oh, hang on a minute. What the church is saying the Bible says doesn't match what the Bible says. Or what our version of the Bible says, I should point out. And
And one of
that's where it really fell down. As soon as you got the Bible out of the control of a very select few people, suddenly it could mean anything that the people in charge of it wanted to mean.
I do believe that is an
English
important thing to
speaker.
look.
And also, I want to bring up there. I'm going to make a shout out to a channel, a YouTube channel called Rationality Rules. If you ever heard of him, he made a good video about how the invention of the printing press, as well as the spread of knowledge and with the Enlightenment and all that, helped to bring about the Protestant Reformation and the spread of knowledge to humanity, and weaken the church's grip on power. So if you want to go check that out, it was a good video.
Yeah,
He's
it
great.
sounds like an interesting video.
Yeah, he's great. Just everything he does, I think, is he's well thought and yeah, interesting fellow. I'm a subscriber.
Oh, man, that's high praise. That's good. He must be good.
Also, currently, we're missing a debate between Gutsick Gibbon and a young Earth creationist PhD guy.
That's on tonight, isn't it?
So yeah, I caught like 5 minutes of it before jumping on this stream. But I watched her prep video for it yesterday, and yeah, unsurprisingly, the 5 minutes I saw had him doing exactly the thing that she'd predicted was going to happen, which is talk about how cancer proves that mutation can't have happened, and therefore, yeah, humans can't have evolved from apes.
Ugh.
Oh yes,
yeah.
change means that change can't happen. Ooh.
Therefore, young
Yeah,
Earth
Very,
creationism.
it's
a
always
very
deleterious.
curious argument.
Creationists are. I hesitate to use the word mental, but I don't understand how they could see something that basically proves that evolution takes place and go, oh, that proves it doesn't take place. What? That I don't understand them.
It's interesting to
Yeah.
say the least.
This guy even accepts that speciation occurs
Oh.
because it necessarily has to, because otherwise you can't get from kind to 4 species of elephants and 1,000 species of mice.
Does
Yeah,
he
you
have
just
a
can't get
definition of
there.
kind?
He does not. It waffles around, of
Do
course.
any of them have a definition of kind?
No, they cannot have a definition of kind because every possible definition of kind breaks.
Yeah.
The moment you apply it. Yeah,
The
so it has
moment,
to
the
waffle. And
moment it applies,
he's like,
it breaks.
"Oh, I'm not really an expert on that." So somebody else might be. So he basically dodges those type of questions by sliding past it that way.
Well, I mean, it's just that their definition is just ad hoc. If they ask you,
Yeah.
well, there's cat kind, and then what about
That's why it
lions?
breaks, because
Yeah.
you can't have a definition of kind that is ad hoc and makes sense.
And the thing is, it is ad hoc based on their limited knowledge of biology, so they're just making things up. Of okay, that's the kind.
Oh, yeah.
That's the kind.
Pretty much
The
the
thing
Ken
is-
Ovid school of knowledge.
The thing is, this
Yeah.
guy knows his stuff. He is actually a researcher in this space.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah.
Well,
He also complained that he sued his university for not giving him tenure. And said that it was because he was a young Earth creationist and they were being religiously discriminatory. And no, it came out he lied about his qualifications.
Okay.
So, yeah.
This is like James Tor being wrong about chemistry and being schooled on it by Professor Dave.
Very apt comparison.
And
but I love the video of him sitting at the table with experts in abiogenesis, and just he's looking like a naughty school kid, and every time he opens his mouth,
he just completely shut down. That was so beautiful.
It just it made me cringe on behalf of him. And you go,
man.
it was brutal, and they weren't even meaning to be brutal. They weren't being mean. They just answered. And
They're just having a conversation.
Yeah, I want to bring back the discussion a little bit. I don't want it to get too far out. I do want to focus this week's stream on Rex, and kind of his viewpoints a little bit. So, Rex, just can you get into a little more specifics about kind of the term people use is deconversion. What was your origin? I presume you're originally Christian, especially if you grew up in Texas. So what was that like?
Well, I actually moved to Texas when I was quite young, so I guess that does fit. It was really interesting because I remember going to class and mostly everyone was Christian.
Well, I think we lost you there.
Apologies on that. Mostly everyone was Christian during my schooling, and it wasn't until I hit middle school that I started to see like inklings of atheism and other kind of viewpoints like floating around out there. And I already knew about mechanization and some of the more modern kinds of atheism, but encountering someone and having not an argument with them per se, but just discussing what they believe, it's pretty eye opening. And let's be real, most Christians and Catholics don't neglect to read their Bible anyways. So when you do go back to read the Bible or whatever iteration of it, you'll find some things that are probably disagreeable with what you already believe. And, it kind of snowballed from there, if I'm being honest. And eventually I did discover philosophy, and that's about when it was over. Now, allow me to clarify. I would call myself a soft atheist. I do not believe in a Christian God. At the same time, I do understand like some of or like how I wrote the paper on Kant's critique of pure reason, just reviewing about it. I do understand his critiques, and he says with pure reason you basically can't get to God. You're always going to suppose that God either does or does not exist. Okay, fair. You can't do that with pure reason. But given what I have and given my empirical experience, it really doesn't look like it. And if there were, it doesn't match anything that I would say is compatible with like the miracles that we see in the Bible, for instance. Does that give you a little bit of a sense of what I believe?
Yeah, although I would take exception to your comment about, with Kant that he. It kind of sounded like you were saying that he sort of presupposes the existence of God in the critique of pure reason.
Well,
I don't know.
it's more complicated than that. Allow me
Yeah.
to properly explain. Kant So Kant is arguing against the tradition of people like what was his name? Christian Wolff, I believe. If it's not Christian, it's Wolff something, or people like Leibniz. He's dealing with rationalists. He's dealing also with the David Hume's skepticism. And so here's the thing: Kant, obviously, I think I know. It's worth knowing something about his history. Kant grew up Protestant, I believe, and he was already a religious man, and his mom supposedly had already installed a very, very deep religious faith. And of course, that comes with its ethics when he was very young. So when he first read Hume, he said, it was a very famous quote. He said, Hume awoke him from his dogmatic slumber. And that means he could not deal with Hume's empiricism and, skeptical eye towards the nature of God and, the arguments that God's followers supposedly use. So Kant himself, he did believe in God. I don't want to misconstrue this. Kant did believe in God, but he's a little fishy on that too. Because in the critique of pure reason, which is his greatest critique, and there's three, but that's the main one everyone focuses on. Kant, he says through pure reason alone you cannot get to God. But towards the end of the book, he does say, and actually he runs through these arguments that show you that you can't. And there's what was it, the cosmological argument for God, and he runs through the criticisms and the ideas of those who like try to prove God's existence based on reason alone, and he basically disqualifies them, if we can say that word. But at the end of the book, like I said, Kant, he kind of is fishy, and he says, well, actually, human beings need immortality of the soul, the idea of immortality of the soul, the notion of God, and the notion of free will. And he just basically posits that right there, and it's like, okay, well, that's Kant. He'll tell you you can't absolutely prove God based on pure reason, but at the same time, he believed in things that you obviously couldn't absolutely prove. It's just like free will, immortality, soul, God. And while I do agree that most of the things we do believe as human beings cannot be absolutely proven down to a T on a metaphysical level, it is just the move he made was very fishy because he ultimately retreated back into the morals of Christianity per se, and of course the belief in God, despite him going through the whole journey and say, well, I don't think you can prove it, but it's a matter of faith, etc. Did I clean it up a little bit? Or
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, at least within the critique of pure reason, he lays out the noumena and the phenomena that, and basically postulates that the God is, and as well as, our soul and all that is part of the noumena. So we can't have direct knowledge of it, which in itself is problematic. But in terms of God, he doesn't, he's not, saying that within his critique of pure reason, he's kind of introducing God, but it's more of, he would say that as part of the critique of the practical reason, when it gets into the idea of kind of morality and all that, that's where he introduces God within that moral framework to kind of say that God is sort of necessary for that
oh
moral
yes,
law
yes,
to be complete, right? So that's that this whole summum bonum, that's where he brings it in, and also obviously a lot more in the critique of judgment as well. But within the critique of pure reason, you're saying fishy, but I think it's just him kind of saying that you can neither prove nor disprove God,
yes, yes.
just from within pure reason, just because we don't have access to it just from an epistemological reasons.
Yes, that's basic. That's one of the central notions. He says you absolutely cannot prove it based on pure reason alone. However, and I think it is a good criticism of Kant that people go to him and look at the end, specifically the end of the Critique of Pure Reason, where he says very fast, really, well, we need these beliefs anyways because they're important to us, and then that's how it ends. He ties it in together, but he like I said, the reason why I say he's fishy is because the critical eye that was throughout the rest of the book kind of just was like, well, you know, he basically falls back onto what he's always believed, despite all the philosophy, despite what he says about reason, despite his transcendental aesthetic. I guess people call him a transcendental idealist, but after all of that, he just falls back on what good old Kant always believed. And so, a lot of people take problem with that. And that's what I was trying to outline, that part right there. That's why I believe it's a
Yeah.
little fishy. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. But before we go on, we have a latecomer, John Clark. Hey, John,
Hi, all.
welcome.
Hello.
So,
Good to meet you, man.
So Rex, John is one of our regulars. John, as Rex is, I had mentioned in our last stream, which apparently was taken down because of copyright, and I was a little bit afraid that that's what was going to happen, but
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I had mentioned that Rex was going to be on, and here he is. John, why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Hey, Rex. My name is John, East Coast of the United States. I've been an atheist for...
You forgot to say East Coast represent.
East Coast represent! Background in mathematics. Currently, I work in the I work in the marketing department for my company. Been an atheist for most of my adult life. As Blarg just commented in the comment section, I have a PhD in terrible jokes. The only thing better than a good dad joke is a terrible dad joke.
And
It's
also
the only
Master
reason
Horrible
we
Punch.
get them, actually.
They're
I
not
agree,
terrible. They're not terrible. They just destroy your brain.
To give you an idea, one of my personal favorites is people who don't know the difference between entomology and etymology bug me in ways I cannot put into words.
Oh,
All right,
okay, that is pretty good.
That was a good one.
That was good. That's a good one. No, that's a good one.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, John. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you as well.
That's exactly in line with the I'm a agnostic, insomniac, dyslexic. I lie awake at night wondering if there really is a dog.
Yes.
That's good. That one's good. Yeah.
I used to worry if there was a dog, but only when I was a kid in grades K through 9.
Yeah, they're pretty good. No, I'll say that. They're terrible, but they're also pretty good.
I love that sweet spot where a joke is so terrible it circles back to good.
So bad it's good.
Yes.
Yep.
Which my boss has told me that sometimes I achieve that high art and most times I don't.
It's always worth the shot, though, right?
Indeed. Well, look, you started the conversation off, and it was great to hear what you're talking about so far. So I'm gonna lay back and just let you have the floor, man.
Okay. I think I was talking about Kant with QC, but it depends on where QC wants to take the conversation.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit. So you were saying that you are kind of a soft agnostic or a soft atheist, agnostic atheist, right?
Would I characterize myself as that? I guess for all intents and purposes, probably. I recognize, obviously, I don't know the universe. I don't know absolute existence or whatever nonsense. So, but I have my skeptical leanings, and I take what I see empirically, and that's what I roll off of. Or at the very least, I am aware that I always could be wrong. I think one of the positions in philosophy is called fallibilism. I think I could call myself a fallibilist because nothing I ever say is completely set in stone or eternal or some other nonsense like a lot of people claim. I recognize that I can always be proven wrong. I can always be, you know.
Nope.
So
Did we
for all
lose you,
intents and
or
purposes.
I think we may
Oh,
have lost you for a few seconds.
oh, sorry about that. I don't know what it is,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
but so I take the philosophical standpoint of fallibilism, as I was saying. That means basically just everything I say is it's not eternal, it's not absolute, it's not like real provable human existence. It can't be disproved, it's infallible. I always take everything with like a grain of salt. So, what good is a universal and eternal truth anyway? We work with smaller t truths. We work with, is this workable? Is this verifiable? Is it an interesting idea? So that's kind of the basis I work on. And in the same way, those are my thoughts on God too. I am not a believer. That's what I'll say. I always understand I could be wrong, but I am not a believer. I'll lay that out. I'd rather call myself a heretic, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I'll turn it over to the rest of the panel after this, but I'm a hard atheist kind of because of what you just said, because we don't need to have metaphysical certainty of things. Because if we did, we wouldn't know that whether the sun would rise tomorrow or whether I would still exist in the very next second. Yet we do know that as in kind of in a practical knowledge, we have
Mm-hmm.
practical knowledge of everything or a lot of things. And based on the practical knowledge, we can ascertain where the idea of God comes from, why people believe that, why it propagates within our society, what the uses might be, as well as kind of the problems with this kind of belief. So we have a good idea of where the concept of God comes from, how it arises, etc. And that's sufficient practical knowledge for us to know that there isn't this, divine entity, this supernatural being, enough for at least for me to say that no, God doesn't exist. If someone comes to me tomorrow or at any time and gives me a practical knowledge of the existence of God, that's fine. So in that sense, it is your kind of fallibilism, that in the sense that there's kind of epistemic humility. So it's always open to additional data. But based on the data that we have, I think we can say with a high enough practical certainty that there is no such thing as God. So it's interesting that we're kind of on two different sides with kind of similar type of take.
Oh yeah.
But let me just turn it over to the other folks, and then we can have your response.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Do you mind if I kind
Yep,
of
go ahead.
respond off to that, QC? So for me, it stems from this idea that the term that I've heard is atheist, which is the concept of a god is one that we can't even ascertain a definition that we can use to so conceptually, like it just doesn't even get off the ground floor. We can test for what we call gravity, we can test for what we call light, we can test for all of these things, we can define it accordingly, and we can adjust those definitions, but we can't even come to a definitional understanding of what God is. And so the concept itself is just meaningless. And therefore, without even a definition, evidence to support the concept of a God doesn't even follow from there. So whenever I'm talking to Neil being the exception here, but whenever I'm talking to theists online, some spreading more obviously into the troll area, and others are honest interactors. That's one of the key areas. Like there are all these concepts about God that they just sort of assume to be true. It's like, well, you can't even make those assumptions. So that's where I come from with when. So if you want to say that because of that I'm a hard atheist, fine. That's sort of the defaults. You come to that conclusion by default. But that's where I find myself with in regards to the conversation about God. And I was kind of wondering, Rex, where so sort of definitionally, atheist or not, when you use the phrase God, what are you referencing?
When I think I'm under the assumption I use the common term reference. I'm not going to explain to you a definition of God because I don't believe I have one. But
Yeah, okay, all right.
I do believe in I do believe in what is commonly referred to as like a Christian God. So let's be frank too. Whenever we discuss theism or atheism, we're not talking about whether you believe in Lord Vishnu or whether you believe in whether you believe in a Set or Jehudi or any of the Egyptian gods. We're talking about it in a Christian context. So that's just what I assume whenever we talk about atheism and theism. We talk about it in a Christian context. So that is usually what I pivot off of, because when someone tells me they believe in God, I'm just going to assume it's one of the largest religions on the planet, and it's Christianity, and it's all its fragmented forms. I'm just going to assume you're referring to the God of the New Testament. Now, obviously, there are other ideas, obviously, but you can, how do I say this? You can be an anomaly and fall outside of that. But when I have a discussion, I just assume that, okay, if you tell me you're theistic, I'm just going to assume you mean Christian. I'm not going to assume you believe in Aphrodite or something like that.
Although it would be lovely if you did.
Honestly, I would find believing in God's much more enjoyable than believing in a singular God or the God of a Christian. I'll say, because even if you guys look into other philosophers, some have a notion of God that is completely different from Christianity. So it's like, okay, or it even disagrees with Christianity on some points, like Spinoza, Benedictus Spinoza, or Baruch Spinoza, depending on which name you use. His definition of God is nothing like the Christian definition of God, and he got in trouble for that because he was considered a heretic, and he even got excommunicated from the Jewish community. So, yeah,
That's kind of why I get a lot of flack from theists in comment sections, because they assume when I mention that I'm a theist, I'm going to agree with their specific version of a monotheist deity, and I don't. I don't have a personal view of a god. I don't have a scriptural view of a god, and that's why a lot of them kind of throw the accusation at me that I'm an atheist. It's like, well, no, because to be an atheist, I'd have to not have a belief in any kind of god.
it really depends on what sense you take these terms too. But I see exactly where you're coming from.
They make a huge assumption about what a god means, to the point that basically anyone who dares to suggest a different definition gets labeled as, an atheist or a heretic or a Satanist or whatever. You name it, I've been called it.
Ironically, you that is exactly the original usage of atheist.
Yeah,
it wasn't to attack a person who didn't believe in gods. It was to attack a person who didn't believe in the one you believed in.
Yeah,
back in Greek
that's how the
times.
Greeks used it, and and the Christians.
Irony.
The Christians who argue online don't seem to understand that.
I think that's plain old dogmatism. I'll just throw my 2 cents out there. It is just dogma.
And that's all they really got.
Well, yeah, I think that's the main problem. It's not fighting theists per se. It's fighting dogmatists and people who want to control how other people think.
I can wholeheartedly agree with that because I've had good conversations with intelligent theists or people who do have a religious faith of some kind. I'm not here to like destroy them or anything, and everyone has their own beliefs too. But at the same time, most people are not like that. It's really just a dogmatism thing where one person assumes that they figured out the universe, and the rest that follows is that everyone else is wrong if they don't conform to that view. And that's kind of what you're getting at. It's just that dogmatism that's been around, philosophically been around since probably as long as humans did philosophy, which is another rabbit hole entirely. But
And if you want to, put something that I'm against, then put that. That's what I'm against, because I will fight that till I die.
Religious dogmatism comes in many forms too.
Yeah.
Plug,
Yeah.
did you want to chime in, or Steve-O?
Yeah, no, I already hogged the conversation enough. I'll let someone else talk.
So, Steve-O, what's your view on your God belief?
My God belief is that, how should I put this? He just doesn't exist, because if he existed, then everything in this world would be known. We don't have to worry about all the problems, all the pain, all the suffering. If he was truly the omnipresent, all the omnis, then this world would be a much better place. Yet we still suffer. We still work ourselves to the bone. We just, if this God was real, we'd have a much better life, because everything would be a better place, but we don't. And therefore, I pretty much subscribe to the fact that if God existed, then we wouldn't have to, then life would be simple, but it's not. It's far more complex, and shows that God doesn't exist because, forgive me, I'm not good with thinking my feet here, so give me a moment. I'm sorry. But if the world was I lost my train of thought. If God existed, then this world would be a much simpler place, but it's not. It's far more complex. Therefore, I feel that God does not exist.
Oh, and
That's
yeah, that is interesting because I feel like that follows from the fact that if God did exist, God had to have been moral in some sense or create his own morality and thereby govern the world justly, which I don't believe that is necessarily true either.
Yeah, I also think it's an interesting point too, because we also get that thrown at us all the time that we're atheists because we want to sin, and you just go, no, look, I'm no more a sinner with quotation marks around it because I don't believe sin exists, but I'm no more of a sinner than any other sort of regular old Christian. So I could become a Christian tomorrow, and it would not interfere with my life in any way. I'm a cisgendered straight male, so with a sort of a solid morality or sense of morality. So I don't steal and I don't, do all of that sort of thing. So it would be super easy for me to be a Christian tomorrow, and then I get the idea of getting to see all of my family again and living forever. There is no downside to being a Christian for me, apart from the fact that there is absolutely no reason to believe any of that is true. So yes, I have to put up with the less favourable position rather than the more favourable one. Whereas Christians have to give up a lot to come back away from the idea that the world is, this place where you can get to go on forever. Yeah.
I think you touched on something very important too. I think the nature of religion, or at least the religion, and like I'm talking in the grandiose sense, in the grandest sense, is to answer a lot of fundamental questions. Like, why are we here? Does life have meaning? What makes my meaning? What are the forces out there? And if you are religious, by any means, you're going to have some answers to those questions in those regards. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But in the context of Christianity, Christianity is going to lay down the rules for you right there. And once you stop thinking about those rules, you just kind of fall back on them. Like they become natural. And at that point, you just stop thinking. At that point, you quit philosophizing in a way because you already assume you have the answer. And like you just said, you can live a perfectly practical and moral life without the notion of God. And many people do, I would add. Many people already do that. You don't need God to necessarily be moral. I feel like that's always been a ridiculous argument. David Hume, actually, in his dialogues on religion, uh, brings up that same point. He says, well, some people believe that you need God to be moral, that you need the belief in the Christian God specifically, but obviously that's a bogus claim. And it's funny because he even goes as far as to say, "Sir, I would call you a just reasoner, but not a good human being." Because if you were to say that, there are some people who would act on their impulses and their sins, and they'll do whatever they want because now they don't have, a big watchdog in the sky watching them, policing their activity, which is a funny, interesting thing. It does keep people in line. It does keep potential wolves in line. That's what David Hume said. And just find that notion hilarious.
Except it
Yeah.
just doesn't, because of the
Yeah.
notion of forgiveness. The Bible basically says Hitler can go to heaven, whereas Gandhi is going straight to hell.
That is. It is also wishy-washy because, and you've actually reminded me on something Nietzsche says too. It's the genius stroke of Christianity. Did you guys know what that is? Should I explain?
I
No,
don't
I'm not familiar.
So in the genius stroke of Christianity that Nietzsche calls it, and as you guys are familiar with Nietzsche, he basically says, well, think about it like this. So you are basically doomed. Most humans, even by Jesus's admission, is doomed. Like they're doomed. They're going to hell. But at the same time, the same guy who is damning you to hell can also be your savior. That's pretty genius because that's how you trap someone into believing for sure, right? Because the only way you can potentially be saved is to become a true believer in the same guy who will damn you to all eternity. That's why Nietzsche calls it a genius, a Christianity's stroke of genius, because you need it regardless in that equation.
Yeah, so
It's also very humorous too. Mhm.
Yeah, so pretty much damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly.
And Nietzsche also goes on. I mean, he talks quite a bit of Christianity, but
Oh
he
yeah,
kind of
plenty.
criticizes it for essentially making weakness into a virtue, so that I think this is where a lot of people misunderstand Nietzsche. But when he uses terms like slave mentality and all that, but it's the idea of you know this weakness and suffering and meekness and all that is essentially a moral virtue. And so there are a lot of kind of fun aphorisms where he uses that. But I do want to address what Tunaman was asking about whether one is still allowed to say cisgender on Twitter. I found out today that that you can't, because a lot of people do write cis with C1S, and I responded to that and didn't do that, and my post actually got flagged as being hateful or something. So you can't.
Oh, that sucks.
So you can't. Yeah.
Interesting.
And yeah, and the other thing is in terms of the idea of sin. So and I think John Clark would appreciate this, but Pope Leo is. I guess he was educated or he has some background in mathematics. So he is someone, or probably one of the first popes who really understand what sin is. Along with tangent and cosine.
Well done, QC.
I heard someone else, post that. So I thought.
Granted,
that
bringing
really
that up is a bit of a tangent, but I will definitely co-sign on the joke.
That's true. So it was a tangent.
Oh, John.
And there we go.
Oh.
Yeah. So my brother is a conservative Catholic. He and I have been going back and yeah. he and I haven't agreed on much since we were children. decent guy, and I keep pointing out to him that he and I engage in assault, murder, and stealing the exact same amount. And I already go around stealing and assaulting people as much as I want. So please explain to me how your God is necessary, because I can get to effectively what is 99.999% the same morality just through enlightened self-interest. And that enlightened self-interest is, okay, since I don't want people randomly going around punching me in the face, I'm not going to go around punching other people in the face, and I'm going to encourage that to not happen. So please explain where your God is necessary. And that's been the topic of debate for over 40 years now.
That is. I'm actually in a similar situation. I have a brother, same thing, but we disagree on a lot. But yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Like, all right. So the energy can be neither created nor destroyed. It can only change forms. So we aren't dealing with a universe from nothing. Whereas with your deity, we do need a nothing. So he go ahead.
That's not true.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
Uh-oh. The physicist jumps in.
Okay.
Here we go.
That's there was a brilliant female physicist who put together a theorem basically that talks about reversibility. Anywhere you've got just trying to think of what her name was now, brain escapes me. But essentially, energy is not a conserved quantity in the universe. The energy momentum tensor is a conserved quantity because in a universe that changes shape, it's not a reversible situation, so you can't get energy conservation in the universe. On a human time scale, it's fine. So the universe is not changing very much from moment to moment. So the difference that we would detect is so tiny that law of thermodynamics is effectively true. But as it applies to the universe, that's not true at all. A great example of that is that the photons from the cosmic microwave background have lost 99.91% of their energy as they traveled to us. That's not because they've given it away to anything. It's just because the universe has changed along the way and the energy is just not there anymore. So, yes, that's it. Nota, that's the one. Yes, Nota's theorem. Yeah, I've got a little comment somewhere that I can post up. But yes, also there's good reason to think that the universe contains zero energy in total, so that that there's essentially the negative energy of gravity of the gravitational wells exactly matches the energy that essentially creates them. So the Big Bang was just separation of these two pieces of energy, because the universe appears to be completely flat. So you can look that up on like Wikipedia, zero energy universe.
That is an interesting idea. An interesting.
She basically she did a whole thing on symmetry.
Yeah.
And basically anywhere that there's a symmetry, it means that there will be a conservation of the element involved in that symmetry.
Yeah.
I mean, I would certainly be open to. I guess if you're looking at energy expression as a curve, you're going to have extremes of positive and negative, which will effectively cancel each other out. But that doesn't negate the median energy distribution, would it? I'm not
So
sure I
the-
asked that question properly. But do you get what I'm saying? It's like, okay, yeah, you've got the extremes where you can mathematically have all the energy cancel out, but then that doesn't change the fact that there's still this. You can have a pit and you can have a mound of sand, and it cancels each other out, but that doesn't change the fact that there's still that mound of sand.
Yes, that's exactly right. So that's basically the way to look at it, that you
That
dug a
is-
hole and put the dirt over there. So, but in total, there is 0 additional dirt added to the system.
So it sort of
Okay. I
balances
see,
out.
I see what
Yeah,
you're saying.
okay.
Okay. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
take a look at that. That's really thought provoking.
Yeah, it
Interesting.
really is.
Now, do you believe it though?
Look, there's good reason to think it, because to the limit of our ability to test, the universe appears flat. So, so it looks like gravity. So the sort of sucking power of gravity and the mass of the universe exactly cancel each other out to create flat space. So that is a curious outcome, that those two are so precisely matched. So there's a whole discussion about it, and it's a pretty good one. Lots of the fairly high end physicists who know way more than I do about it are pretty happy with that.
I would point
idea as
out
well.
that her maths wasn't originally designed to apply to the universe. She
No.
just decided to apply it to
The universe.
to basically to where symmetries could exist. And so she did a mathematical thing where basically if a symmetry, if there can be a symmetry existing, what's the phrase that was used? To every continuous symmetry generated by local actions, there corresponds a conserved current, and vice versa. Or there are corresponding quantities whose values are conserved in time.
With that being the
Basically,
case,
if you could perceive a symmetry, there's a conservation going on.
Yeah.
And when it comes to
In
time,
the case, in the case of the universe, because the universe is changing, the Lagrangian for space-time isn't a fixed quantity, so there isn't a symmetry associated with that. You can't take an action that is occurring now and move it anywhere in time and get the same result.
but wouldn't with the universe sort of effectively flattening out from an energy perspective, wouldn't that then strengthen the credibility of the idea that energy is neither created nor destroyed? Since we're just shifting the
it's
sand
not
around.
energy per se,
Okay.
because energy itself isn't a. Sorry, go ahead. You know better than me, Blog. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the universe is flat from a curvature perspective, so not from an energy sort of perspective. So it has to do with the shape of the universe. If there was a lot more gravity, the universe would be curved inwards, and if there was a lot more, if there was less gravity, the universe would be curved outwards. And it doesn't appear that that's the case. It appears that it's that exact spot right in the middle. So the universe can continue to expand. Imagine just like a sheet of paper getting larger on your desktop.
Yeah.
It's still getting larger, but it's not changing shape. But so it stays flat, but its size increases. So if you've gone along and drawn a little, say you drew a 1 centimeter line on your piece of paper, and then your piece of paper doubled in size, and then you measured it, you would get a different answer. So that is not a symmetry. So you can't measure that at different points in time, because you get different answers. So that's the issue about the lack of symmetry. The once you add momentum into the so you've got the stress energy tensor or the energy momentum tensor, whichever way you want to call it, you take into account those other components, and then you've got a conserved quantity.
At the very least, it's an interesting idea, but I do believe that this basically bridges into the philosophy of science, and which ideas, do we have a good grasp on these things, or is it like a paradigm shift, like what Thomas Kuhn argued, or what's going on with that? So that is also, and I do believe. Let me just say straight up, I do believe that high end physics, theoretical, or even if we go to quantum mechanics, I do believe it just breaks down into philosophy at that point. And really, philosophy is the basis for basically how we can have a discussion on this at all.
Yeah, it is
And
testable.
physics and
That's the
science.
point, though. That's the thing, though. So this is tested by us measuring the flatness of the universe by looking at the size of triangles, for example, and the interior angles of those triangles as spread across the universe. If you're getting 180 degrees in a triangle, no matter how big your triangle is, then the universe is flat. Whereas if you get a number that's larger than 180, then your universe is curved inwards. It's sort of spherical. Or if you get a number that's less than that, then you're looking at a hyperbolically curved universe. So it's more saddle shaped.
Yes, I think that's interesting, but right then I would have to call into question, empiricism and what it means to measure something. And the fact is, can we assume uniformity in science, where if we look at this and say, hey, what if it changes the next time we look at it? Or there are problems. There are philosophical problems with undertaking science in general. By the way, I just wanted to throw that out.
In my view, you only really get philosophy of science when the measurements are a bit too vague to make very strong certainties. So you can't really philosophize about whether a 1 centimeter is actually a 1 centimeter or not. Until you get into the certainties of how big the space actually is that's containing that 1 centimeter.
Oh, I must disagree with that because, as you know, even philosophy touches on what space is, what space could possibly mean. So how could you measure something without a lot of presuppositions?
That's only when you're not actually sure about what space is.
Here's the thing, though.
Philosophy
what is your
only
certainty?
arises when you've got little knowledge.
Here's the thing, though. Like, I agree.
Kind of the less philosophy there is to talk about it.
The thing is, there are pragmatic views to it. Obviously, I'm not going to be ridiculous and diss science or anything like that, but there are obvious philosophical implications when one is doing science, and I don't think those can be circumvented, because even like what you said with your with the measurement, we have to ask ourselves, all right, what are we doing when we're measuring? What exactly is it? What are our definitions? And whether we're certain on something or not is not scientific. That is philosophical, pure philosophical. Like if you say you're certain that God doesn't exist, for instance, that is not a scientific proof of it. That's you bringing certainty into it. That is, on what grounds can that rest? And that also has to deal with
I would point out that science doesn't say absolute certainty. It says,
of course,
this is the best to our knowledge.
It says this is pretty good, but you see what you said there, though, at the end.
And you'll find that the philosophy is usually under the kind of the edges of it.
Here's the problem, though.
People don't really argue about relative values of sugar.
No, here's the thing, though. I feel like you're
saying, "What is it? Really a kilogram of sugar? You're selling me? Is it? Are you sure?"
I feel like you're undercutting philosophy a bit, because philosophy would have it that
I am. Sorry.
We would have to look at the social implications. We have to look at how exactly such a thing arises in a context, and that's just one dimension of it. So I do not believe that science is just a thing that says, all right, here it is, and philosophy is to the side. For science to even work, there need to be propositions in there. And obviously, most scientists don't even believe in absolute certainty. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm trying to say is, how, there are problems like how can you be certain, or how certain scientific theories are come to be accepted within the community. That is not a scientific subject either. There are social elements and thereby philosophical elements at play here that determine that. So, and even philosophers who are into, there are bridges and call one to the other. They are fully aware of this, that there is social elements involved, and you cannot really separate them because at the end of the day we're human beings, and it's the view we don't have access to this. And there, if you
But
do believe in Thomas Kuhn, there are also paradigm shifts. So
I know,
science
but
obviously.
that's not what makes philosophy or science dependent on philosophy. I mean, philosophy is like a layer on top of it where you can take a look at science and through a philosophical lens, but you can do that with other things, with sociology, with psychology, etc. So
Well,
I don't think you can create that connection between philosophy
I
and science.
well, I believe you can, and my reason being is that for science to even work, for you to say, well, here, let's test this and let's see what happens, there needs to be an underlying metaphysic there. There needs to be something that
Yeah,
says,
but
why do you
that's not
think this is
philosophy.
going to? Metaphysics is
Philos-
philosophy.
no.
That is
Metaphysics isn't
metaphysics.
philosophy itself. Philosophy is just
Metaphysics.
talking about metaphysics.
Metaphysics is the soil which other branches of philosophy spring from. So you cannot talk about epistemology or aesthetics or morals without having an underlying metaphysic. And the same is with science too, because science has metaphysical pillars. Now, I'm not trying to say they're a unified
No,
certain.
I would say that science has axioms and it
Here's the
has
thing,
things that basically it says we have to assume these are true
and that's
in order to
philosophical.
do
That's
science.
philosophical. Exactly,
Wait,
that is
so
philosophical.
Rex, wait,
That's
hold on.
not.
Can I make it?
Hold on, you guys. Let me
Yeah.
just say. So,
Sorry.
Rex, can you kind of let Neo complete his point, and then you
Of
can
course,
respond.
of course, of course.
Go
Sorry,
ahead, Neo.
I've got lost in my point now. But, oh boy.
Can I make a suggestion, Q?
Yeah.
Because we're getting really close to an hour
Yep.
and a half, which is about where we like to keep things. But this does sound like a fascinating conversation to pick up the ball with next week.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
Ooh,
and since
Wait, so Rex, what's your availability next week?
I will be on a trip. I will not be available next week.
Okay. So the
Well,
week after then?
we
Uh,
comment section. We can have a chat.
yeah.
we can't. I don't know about the week after. I might still be gone. So
Okay.
the
So
next
that's
week
fine. Then
after
we
that.
can kind of we'll schedule it for some time out, but we can have this
Yeah.
as
Okay.
have the discussion within the comment section, or as well as we can pin it for a future discussion. But thanks, John, because I did want to talk about the 86 thing, and hopefully won't spend too much time on this. But for those of you who may not be aware, James Comey, who was the head of the FBI until Trump fired him, despite
And let's not
him
forget he
essentially
also,
giving Trump the presidency.
yeah, that's it.
Say again, boy.
Oh, I was just going to make that exact. Sorry, I was just going to make that
Yeah.
exact comment that Trump wouldn't have been 45 if it wasn't for
Yeah.
James Comey.
Yeah. And what the horrible thing that James Comey did was he took a photo, and I haven't actually seen the photo, but it was someone, either him or someone, made it into the shape of 8647. And the MAGA are having conniptions on this because they think that 86 can only mean Comey calling for the assassination of Trump because he's president number 47. And also because he was the head of the FBI, even though he's currently a civilian, he somehow has a kind of a special responsibility against posting something like that because there could be someone who sees this and says, well, an ex-head of the FBI who essentially got Trump elected put in 8647, therefore that's motivating me to go and do something physical against Trump. So
now,
based on
correct-
that, the government is apparently looking at this and looking to see if they can prosecute him or investigate him and whatnot. In fact, sending the Secret Service after him. Who was going to say
So-
something?
I was about to say, hasn't Trump and his group talked about 86 in people?
Yes, 8646.
Don't they have quotes of them themselves saying to 86 other people?
8646, as in Biden.
Yep.
So,
And they have
so
shirts.
basically,
They are
why
fundamentally.
aren't they treating themselves with the same standard? Are they not arresting
I'm actually
themselves
it's very
about wanting to assassinate these other people?
Yeah, so Neo, oh my sweet summer child.
Sorry.
Calling, asking why the MAGA is hypocritical. I'm not sure how long you've been around. Where have you
That
been?
was slightly tongue in cheek, to be honest. But yeah, it's
Yes,
I
same here,
do
same
love
here.
that. I do love that the party that espouses to be one of personal responsibility is using the argument that because Comey said this, and if it were to inspire somebody else, that means that Comey is responsible. Like that like to try to do a double bank shot, even though they're the party of responsibility, the party that says guns don't kill people, people kill people. Like just
and in addition, Trump is the free speech president. I don't know if you knew that.
Yes, I've seen on the news every day people being put in prison because of his being the free speech president.
Yep.
It is absolutely bonkers and scary.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if from a free speech point of view, from the government point of view, I mean, it's fine if you think that, that means something horrible and whatnot. But for the government to think that this is something that they need to investigate, that's where the First Amendment and the actual discussion of free speech comes about, because you are essentially chilling free speech if the government is going to come after you for simply posting a tweet that has 8647.
Well, let's not forget the retweet that Trump did with the picture of Biden abducted in the back of a ute. Remember the image on the back, and you just go,
is that real?
So yeah,
That was real. Thinking.
No,
Sorry.
it was someone made a picture and put that on the back of their truck, showing an image of Biden in the back of the truck. If you were looking at it from behind, you'd see Biden. If you could look through the tailgate, you'd see Biden tied up and gagged in the back of the truck.
Oh,
And Matt Gaetz posted a whole pile of 86 various politicians, and there's a whole pile of MAGA T-shirts and stuff you can get with 8646 on it. But Comey, he's done it. Oh my God, he must be wanting to murder the president. Quick, get the
FBI.
Yeah.
So on the screen, I have all the paraphernalia you can buy. I think currently, T-shirts and hats and stuff where it says 8646.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that.
But,
That's wow.
Yep, morality for thee, but not for me.
And by the way, so
hypocrisy.
The argument that people I've seen, so I've been kind of going back and forth about this on Twitter this morning, and one of the argument is, well, Trump was actually there was actually an assassination attempt. So because of that, the meaning of 86 has completely changed, so that previously you could say 8646 because Biden hasn't had a public assassination attempt. But because Trump has, now 86 means something else. When you say 8647, it means something horrible, whereas 8646 is okay. So that's one of the arguments.
It's funny how none of the dictionaries have caught on, because all of the dictionaries still use 86 to mean kick someone out of a restaurant.
Restaurant code.
yeah.
Yeah.
For restaurants. So yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, so apparently it comes from rhyming slang in the 1930s to rhyme with nicks. You 86, you throw them out, get rid of or refuse service to a person. So I definitely have heard it used to refer to killing someone, but yeah, apparently all of the dictionaries are yet to get that definition included, so it must be a rare one.
So if you were in the mob and you
Yeah.
wanted someone killed, you could say 86, right? 86
Yeah.
that guy. And to mean for and have it mean to kill that person. But
Yeah.
if you are an ex FBI head of FBI who's just taking a walk on the beach, you're not communicating, assassinate the president by posting 8647.
No, it's ridiculous.
But
Yeah, it
I mean,
is.
they're really trying to make hay out of this, and I mean, it's really this kind of made up, outrage.
Pearl
Saying,
clutching.
"Oh, you Dems, you guys are so violent. You are advocating for, an- the murder of the president." I'm trying to, be a little bit more careful so that this doesn't get somehow stricken
Right.
or whatever. But but that's what they're saying. They're trying to make this into this. Oh, this isn't protected by free speech because it is.
An incitement to
Calling
violence.
on incitement to violence, which is completely ridiculous. There's no court, even with like the worst MAGA judge, like what's her name, Cannon. Even she's not gonna say that. Oh, this is not protected free speech.
But even if it is even if it isn't protected free speech, because the dictionaries define it as not being what they're claiming it is. Remember, in order to convict someone, it has to be not just the preponderance of evidence, which you can't get, but you have to have it beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's what he intended it to mean. And you just have to open a dictionary and say, well, there's 86. And all of a sudden you've got doubt.
Yeah, the terminology is way
Yeah,
too vague.
it is a thing of interpretation too, because your politics will very definitely see, it will definitely lead you to one conclusion over the other, and it really is just a thing of interpretation and meaning. And I don't believe that you could definitively prove what was his name, what Comey said, or what
Yeah.
Comey posted.
It's
Like
a question of
you can't, yeah, exactly, yeah, you don't know, you can't prove that. But you have a bunch of people saying, "Oh, wait, no, he wants to assassinate the president." It's like, oh, no.
Who was there was the repost of a of somebody who had a crosshairs over their over them was posted on Twitter back during the previous thing, and then the all the right wingers were going, no, that's not a call to violence. I can't remember who it was that had the crosshairs on them.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember the one?
Yeah, this was about a decade and a half ago.
Oh, was it Palin?
It wasn't Palin. Her husband is an astronaut. She actually got shot.
Gabby Giffords or something like that.
Gabby Gifford.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah,
there
yeah,
you
go,
I
Steve.
remember that now.
Well done, Steve.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, it's ridiculous.
It is because. Go ahead.
Yeah, if a MAGA person says something violent, you just go, well, if somebody else goes and does it, well, how many violent things has Trump gone along and said that people should do, and then if someone goes and does something violent, just going, I didn't tell them to. It's not my fault if someone else does something when I've said it. I don't control them. But yeah, Comey posts an image and you go, oh my God, he wants you to murder them. Better go and get him.
Yeah. There is always a big double standard there, but that is popular
Yeah.
politics. Say a lot of double standards, a lot of name calling, and that's yep. With an American
Projection.
spin, of course. With an American spin.
Well, in Texas, you must see a lot of it, right? A lot of MAGA.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt. And there's a lot of discourse here about succession too. So that's a whole nother can of worms, but it's definitely relevant to just living in Texas. And these topics are incredibly relevant here. People are always arguing about them, deciding what is better for a state, the nation, the people, who counts, who doesn't count. A lot of that.
What part of Texas?
San Antonio.
Okay. I have a family member who was originally from Waco.
Oh, well, yeah, that's near Dallas, so a few hours out. But
Yeah.
it's a little different over there, a little different. But here, you hear more about immigration here. That's what I'll say. There's a lot more hot topic on immigration, especially considering the history of San Antonio, the
Yeah.
Alamo, and all that. But yeah, I don't know. It is really coming back to the topic. It is a thing of just interpretation and double standard on what side. I would agree that the outrage is mainly, I don't want to say falsified, but it's very inflated compared to what is
Manufactured.
actually. I'll say
So
it is
there
very.
is from a media and marketing theory. How most cults, and I do consider Trump a cult leader, because if you look at how he behaves, he fits the MAGA movement fits the bite model. And also the two other key questions is what is your ability to question the leader, and what happens when you leave the group. And so by that standard, MAGA is absolutely a cult. And one of the ways that cult leaders control their acolytes is through the social isolation. And part of that social isolation can be achieved through victimhood. They're out to get you. They're trying to suppress this knowledge. They're trying to kill beloved leader. So MAGA has to maintain a constant churning of victimhood so that they can keep its membership ideologically isolated. And you see this over and over again. This is the latest example of this. But if you go back and look at the migrants that were constantly threatening the border until after the election, and then all of a sudden it was no longer a problem. Fentanyl was
Those damn caravans.
yes, those damn caravans, and they're eating the pets. Like they just over and over again, the victimization of the internal group, in this case MAGA, is a quintessential factor of any cult that has any sustaining power to it, and that's why the media arm of the MAGA cult has to maintain that victimhood. Otherwise, you start having to actually engage with the facts on the ground on a objective factual basis rather than subjectual feeling basis. Sorry, that was a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's one of my favorites. Looking at cult studies and how they behave and how they maintain that power of control.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting perspective too, and how the power dynamics within that would actually work. Like
Yeah.
I know there's some I forgot, who said they studied sociology again?
I do.
Oh, okay. It reminds me of something Max Weber said about charismatic leaders in the group, and how like, he did take the example of a cult, for instance, and what happens when the charismatic leader is gone? What happens to the group? How do they become isolated from one another within the group? And that's a sociological thing, a pure sociological view of things. And I think you can apply that just to MAGA, just like what you were saying, John. I would agree with that. It is a fair-minded view of it.
Yeah. You're familiar, Rex, with the bite model?
I've heard, but I have not personally looked into it or done enough research.
So if you have time, and if you don't, you don't. I understand the real world gets in the way. That's in fact the real world getting in the way was why I was late today. But take a look at the bite model and see how there is a 1-to-1 connection with how MAGA operates.
Okay, I can take a look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things will kind of take you down a rabbit hole because then, if if you look at what Trump is doing to what happened in Nazi Germany, right? You see kind of these parallels, and
Oh, you can go down multiple
Oh, yeah.
rabbit holes with that.
yeah,
Well, in
That's
that
a
case,
lot. That's a lot of parallels. I've seen
case-
a lot of that.
yeah, he's already got his first concentration camp, and he's got his Gestapo. So there's the concentration camp in Venezuela, and the Gestapo is ICE.
I thought it was in El Salvador, actually.
Oh well, yeah, sorry, El Salvador. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see the comment about Alcatraz from Tuna Man?
Yes, I did.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Did you see the potential origin of Trump's brain fart?
Oh
that,
yeah,
that
oh my God,
did that? It was on TV. The 1979 Clint Eastwood film Escape from Alcatraz was on TV the night before. So he was down in Mar-a-Lago for the weekend, and it was playing in Mar-a-Lago. And then the next day, he's come out and going, "Oh, we're going to revamp Alcatraz because no one escapes from Alcatraz."
Uh,
Oh, no.
Except
A little
the
ridiculous,
confirmed cases of people that have escaped from Alcatraz. I have somebody, a very, very close friend of mine. I've mentioned her, I think, in the podcast in the past, whose grandmother is German and grew up in Germany in the 30s and 40s. She's over 90 years old now. And she says that every time she hears Trump talking, she is reminded of her childhood. So this is a first hit, and again, now you can make the argument this is anecdotal, and okay, I accept it.
Yeah, of course.
But I find it chilling that somebody who survived that atrocious period of history is looking at what's going on in our world today, in America today, and says, "I've heard this song before. It does not end well for anyone." And
It is striking because she's lived through it. So
yeah,
that adds
that's
adds a lot of credibility. It's not just some rando on Twitter saying this. It's someone who has lived experience that we don't have and we will never have.
Hopefully not.
Yep.
It's
not optimistic.
Craig,
Yeah.
I just wanted to address what Craig Kelly said. No, it's not even close to 1930s Germany. The Holocaust hadn't started in 1933, but they had started. So in 1933, they started opening concentration camps and forming the Gestapo. So and it went downhill from there. It has to start somewhere. So yeah, it's not 1939 Germany, but 1933 Germany. It's very, very. There's a lot of parallels at that point. That's the point being made. It's and America's sort of slide into fascism will necessarily look different to Germany's slide into fascism. Of course it will.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. If you want to characterize it as such, yeah.
Well,
because we do have the Constitution that gives us due process, rights to habeas corpus.
But the problem
Hopefully,
is
no
the
one says anything about kind of canceling the writ of habeas corpus. I hope no one named Stephen Miller says anything like that.
And plus, we have birthright citizenship, so we have nothing.
That's right. I mean, no one's going to take that away. There's no.
And no one's going to ignore the courts. It's not like the executive branch is going to ignore the courts and tell them they have no right to say anything.
If the Supreme Court says it, then the executive has to respond to it. That's just like a red line, and no one should cross that. By the way, going back to the Escape from Alcatraz thing, so the ironic thing is, like, apparently it was running on PBS station, in Florida. So I think it's an argument to. I think it's an argument to get rid of PBS. Or at least
that absolutely is. Big Bird's got to go.
Yeah.
I will point out an observation that my 11th grade history teacher made, which is that history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So you were talking about the slide into fascism is necessarily going to be different when you take it out of its historical context and also its geographical context, which is absolutely true. But that's one of the reasons why due diligence is so important on both sides of the political spectrum. I mean, I obviously have my own squishy, liberal progressive point of view, but making sure that we allow ourselves to continue to have the conversation of, are we making those same mistakes again? And that's where referring to people like the German grandmother and talking to other people who, historian after historian after historian that I've found has said this is getting scarier and scarier. I've got friends right now who are actively in the process of trying to move to Canada because they are terrified of what short and long term is going to happen to their trans children. It is, I've got people who I know personally that are worried that their immigration status does not matter, that they're just going to get rounded up and without any due process, without any opportunity to defend themselves, even though they're here legally, it does not matter. This is one of those situations where I really don't take a reactionist view to the news. I try to be more thoughtful, but it really is getting harder and harder to ignore the idea that if we don't start taking active protest and active reaction to the government in the form of, non-violently, but getting out into the street, holding up signs, hounding our representatives to make sure that they get accountable. So Rex,
that's always the thing, though. Like, oh, sorry, am I cutting out?
No. I was jibber jabbering at this point. So go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, that's also a pitfall too, because if you study like the history of leftism, for instance, and even some peaceful protests, there are things like the Kent State Massacre, and they still happen. Even peaceful protests are still disrupted. So, listen, I won't say anything more radical than that, even though I definitely have radical ideas. But even just talking about this can get you in trouble, like on YouTube, for instance. So, I have my own qualms with the effectiveness of peaceful demonstration, because I really do think they require vast, large amounts of numbers for it to really make an effective difference. And there are many groups in the United States, we've seen them, that started off as peaceful, and then they basically abandoned their ways because they realized they were not making any headway under peace. And we have groups like the Black Panthers, for instance.
Sure.
Who, they became more radical as they went on, but also the police were also kind of putting a big boot on them, and it was just trying to outdo each other. And you see where this is going. They became more radical as it went on because they felt the need that it needed to be more radical together. The movement itself needed more traction, and it couldn't rely on peaceful protests, like free love, hippies kind of style 60s peaceful protests. That didn't really happen with really radical groups because they understood that it had its faults and its limits. And if you really cared about a movement, maybe peaceful is, you need to explore other options. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. And look, I certainly am aware of examples, multiple examples of, fine people on both sides starting out as peaceful, and then elements within those peaceful movements either losing patience or as a reaction to violent counter movements, spiraling into much more toxic behavior. That's absolutely historically true.
Mhm.
I would point to examples within the civil rights movement of the 60s and early 70s. I would point to Gandhi, and how we have examples of, again, the risk there is charismatic leaders being able to hold the center, and then what happens to those movements after those charismatic leaders die. That's a fascinating conversation in terms of the historiography, how we look at those. When you're able to come back to the group, Rex, I would love to explore that with you further, because how groups respond to counter movements is often just as much of how they get defined in history as the actions themselves.
And I'm the same way. I like to really discuss this, because I feel that's a very important part of history itself.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Sociology, I think, is a wonderful tool to look at that too, because
Yeah.
it tries to play like a science of the people and figure out how things work and how that work. Yeah,
That's exactly what it is.
yeah, and its origins are Auguste Comte, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong. It's Auguste Comte, the philosopher, who saw science and it was like science making headway, and he said, "Hey, why don't we try this with people? Like, what about people? What about the science of the people? How do they work? How do they move in groups, etc." And I think it is a very useful tool. It has its limits, and I obviously have my qualms with sociology because it quite it rightfully, perhaps haphazardly, ignores the individual human and their ideas and motivations, and it attempts to present people as like more of a collective group and sometimes monolithically. And I don't agree with that, but yeah, it is a fascinating conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you, John. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely.
no problem.
All right, so I'm going to wrap it up here. We're getting to the 2 hour mark, but definitely, I think we all have to be cognizant of what's happening, and I think you need to speak out in however way possible. One celebrity I like is Dolly Parton, because I think she speaks out in a way that's not overtly political, where she's taking sides. But one of the things with being her fan is that there are some issues. So so I mean, I get it. I get it. You love due process, so you want to.
That's what DP stands for. Yes.
Yeah, due process. Due process. Make sure you keep in mind due process. But yeah, thanks, Rex, for coming on. This was a very stimulating, interesting civil discussion, and we always love having people who have the uh, I guess a motivation and the desire to have a civil discussion on things, and we don't have to agree on everything, but it's fun kind of exploring people's different views. And once again,
Yeah, thank you.
Craig and Neo, thank you for staying up so late. And and I
Thanks,
think
Craig.
hopefully Tuna Man is still up. But yeah, it's always interesting having you guys in the comments and having the discussions. But Rex, I guess we might have you on maybe the next time you're available, maybe in a few weeks. Just ping me on the DMs and we can make arrangements. So just DM me when you are next. You think you'll be on Saturday that you think you'll be available. This stream is on Saturdays, and we have it pretty regularly at 8 p.m. U.S. Central. So,
Hey, thank you so much for
look
having me.
forward.
Yeah.
Yes, and we look
That's
forward
been
to
good.
having you back on. Was someone's gonna say something?
I was just going to say, next week we've got for sure we'll have. Oh, can you hear me?
Florida.
Yes, we'll have Florida Man on. Florida Gump, for sure.
I want a piece. I want to take a piece.
There's no way he'll skip next week.
Okay, great. But who's the other person in case he doesn't show? Who's the other person?
Oh well, we could grab any of them. They
Okay.
Maybe
All right.
maybe we'll get the Why Dumb You Must Chris Massey to come on.
All right.
Might have
Oh.
to,
So-
I have to deal with
Yeah.
it.
So we shall see. We shall see. And just in case, I'll see if I can corral someone else to come on. Maybe Joe, or we'll see if Alex is available as well.
Lovely.
So, all right, sounds good. So thank you everyone for being on and staying on, and we will see you. And I have to make sure I show the outro. But thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, everyone.
All right, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Cheers, all.